Right now, the NRA says the battle against gun control is about much more than just guns. They say it's a culture war, a battle for liberty. What does it all mean for the prospect of new gun legislation in the U.S.? And next, immigration reform takes center stage. Can the Senate's Gang of Eight actually get it done? And later, some are outraged at the suggestion that one of the alleged Boston bombers might be buried in the U.S. We'll ask what should be done with those remains. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. We begin with the new culture war, the battle over gun control. The National Rifle Association kicked off its annual convention Friday with this statement from the group's president-elect. Quote, "This is not a battle about gun rights," Jim Porter said. "It's a culture war." Porter assumed the presidency of the NRA today. As NRA members were meeting, gun control advocates were pointing to this newly released dash cam video from a March shootout. An Ohio man who failed to stop at an intersection repeatedly fired at cops using an AK-47 style assault rifle. But at the NRA convention in Houston, talk show host Glenn Beck insisted there can be no compromise on gun rights.
Let us now start the conversation about responsibility. The freedom of all mankind, make no mistake, is at stake.
Debate raged inside and outside of the NRA convention Sunday.
As far as the state of the NRA, I believe they're stronger than ever.
January 14, 2013, Terrell Frazier was killed by gunshot at the age of 21.
It's the first NRA convention since the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary, and the first since legislation to expand background checks failed in the Senate.
Let's not fool ourselves. It doesn't mean the war is over.
And revenge is what is motivating the president's unrelenting attacks on gun owners today.
When it comes to guns, don't expect this crowd to give in on anything. The NRA's leadership even invoked the manhunt for the Boston bombers.
Frightened citizens, sheltered in place, with no means to defend themselves. How many Bostonians wish they had a gun 2 weeks ago?
That a potentially powerful argument. A little bit more about Jim Porter, the new leader of the NRA. You heard a snippet from him in the piece. He's got a flair for the dramatic, certainly. In June of 2012, he delivered a speech to the New York Rifle and Pistol Association. There, he called President Obama a, quote, fake president. He also called Attorney General Eric Holder, quote, rabidly un-American, and accused Holder of trying to brainwash the American people into giving up their guns. Porter then went on to call the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression.
Now, y'all might call it the Civil War, but we call it the War of Northern Aggression down south. But that was the very reason that they started the National Rifle Association, was to teach and train the civilian in the use of the standard military firearm. And I am one who still feel very strongly that that is one of our most greatest charges that we can have today, is to train the civilian in the use of the standard military firearm, so when they have to fight for their country, they're ready to do it. Also, when they're ready to fight tyranny, they're ready to do it. Also, when they're ready to fight tyranny, they have the wherewithal and the weapons to do it.
By the way, that smoke in the background wasn't actually coming from Porter, just some unfortunate staging there. Porter has been working as a lawyer defending gun manufacturers like the Smith & Wesson Corporation. Porter's father, by the way, also served as the NRA's president in the 1960s. So with NRA membership at 5 million, what chances does gun legislation have? Want to bring in tonight's panel on this. O'Brien Murray is back with us. He is a Republican political consultant who managed the campaign for former Congressman Bob Turner. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Dominic Carter here as always, political journalist and author. And Evan Thies returns tonight. He is the founder of Brooklyn Strategies, a former aide to Andrew Cuomo, and a former staffer for Hillary Clinton. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you all very much. Just going through the piece that we saw from the NRA convention this weekend, you got Glenn Beck with a prominent speaking role. You got Jim Porter with some of the history that we laid out there. Of course, Wayne LaPierre. My initial thought was, with friends like these, who needs enemies in the gun debate? Is the NRA being hurt by the people it's selecting to put front and center?
What you're talking about makes great headlines, but it's nothing new. These have been supporters of the NRA for years. This is nothing new. New president, they have a convention, people come and speak. They speak to their supporters. They have people speak at their conventions that their supporters and their members want to hear speak. In that environment, those people are rock stars. So that's just the same old thing. It's nothing new. You can talk about all you want, make new headlines, but it's the same old news.
You know, Andrew, I have to agree 1,000% with the point you just made. We may find it funny and mock them, but to their base, they are rock stars. These people are heroes to their base, to the membership of the NRA. And they're not going to concede not one ground. I don't know what all this is going to mean for future legislation, but one thing you can expect, they will fight tooth and nail to the very end, not conceding anything. But this is nothing new. These people are rock stars to their base.
But Evan, in that echo chamber, to the base that O'Brien and Dominic were referring to, is there a chance that the group is marginalizing itself, that it's moving itself further away from the mainstream thought when it comes to guns in the U.S.?
I would hope that would be the case. And you look at poll numbers, 9 out of 10 Americans think there should be background checks, agree with the common sense measures the White House and this bipartisan group has put forward in Washington. But look, it would be funny how out of touch they are if it wasn't obviously messing with our ability to get things done. We didn't get the initial package done, and that was a watered down version of it. Now, hopefully, the White House can restart this debate, and with serious people in Congress, we can get this going. But that sort of rhetoric is not helpful. It's not helpful for this issue. It's not helpful when people who are that radical have that kind of force behind them to start messing with real change in Washington.
I wouldn't use the term radical at this point. I mean, that's divisive terminology. If you want to work together and pass things, you don't call your opponents radical.
I think it's radical to say the Civil War is still going on.
Well, okay, that tape was from how long ago, and to what group was
Last
it?
year.
And in what context? Okay, I mean, I just spent this past week. I spent this past week down in North Carolina. People make those comments all the time in jest, and without seeing the full clip, you don't know the context of which it's done. So therefore, to call it radical without knowing the full context, you may be right that it's inappropriate. But radical is not the way to label anybody if you're trying to work with them, which is frankly what the vice president is doing too in all this gun debate. One of the things that's been talked about too, and we've heard this said before by members of the NRA that were there and those that lead the NRA in the past, in the past year, David Keene, that when the vice president had the member of the NRA from the staff at the meeting to talk about how we're all going to work together, he looked at him and said, "You're here, but the fact you're here doesn't really mean anything. We're going to go on without you." He was not working with him. He was just there to steamroll them and say what he wanted to say.
And let's play that. Let's show that clip. The latest quote from Vice President Biden. Evan?
People of goodwill from both parties have to come together and push back on statements like this that they're making. I mean, when people in the NRA are essentially saying the only way to fix a broken government is with guns, that is damaging. That is damaging to the United States. The only way to fix a broken government is to vote, and is to make sure that people use our system of government. These people are seditionists. Well, and they need to go. And people of goodwill from both sides have to stand up against them.
No one person speaks for any one party unless they're the chairman of the party, okay? And if you look at it, what you'd be saying right now is saying Al Sharpton speaks for the Democratic Party historically and today when he sits on TV and does what he does and tries to bring the state Senate together for the Democrats, try to fight against anyone that's trying to take control from the Democrats in the state Senate. So you can't sit here and label one person as speaking for a party when they speak for an issue and not the party. That's a very different scenario.
We just have to call radical when we see
one. The NRA, I mean, give me an example where the NRA has worked with gun control supporters to try to come up with some sort of gun legislation.
Well, let's not even just talk about what you're talking with legislation. But don't forget, their number one mission has always been gun safety.